There's something that gets instilled from early childhood, through words, gestures, even glances. Something that slowly seeps into the consciousness of every human being as they grow, learn, and adapt. A principle that is rarely questioned, precisely because it's everywhere. In schools, in families, in books, in the judgments of others. You breathe it in, absorb it, inherit it as if it were an absolute truth. It's not a written rule. It's something deeper, a foundation. It's on this pillar that the distinction is built between who is right and who is wrong, between who deserves respect and who needs to be corrected, who works and who disappoints. An invisible yet powerful standard that shapes behavior, thoughts, and emotions, and is often mistaken for conscience itself. This is the pillar that holds up the entire structure of education, the idea that behaving well is always the right thing to do, that being polite, quiet, compliant, and respectful of rules means being mature. A dogma praised everywhere, ingrained from childhood, elevated to the status of moral truth. Yet this belief, the most accepted, the most ingrained, the most right of all, is often the most destructive. Because it doesn't create conscious human beings, but obedient ones. It doesn't build authentic character, but adaptive personalities. It's an elegant form of self-erasure disguised as virtue. What's praised as good manners often works like a cage. Behind the appearance of control and balance lies a psychological prison that teaches children from a young age not to disturb, not to resist, not to show too much. Those who internalize this logic quickly learn to suppress their voice, to tone down their feelings, to silence every spontaneous impulse. Over time, they even forget what that voice sounded like, what it truly wanted, which boundaries it should have drawn. Friedrich Nietzsche exposed all of this with a clarity that still burns today. He was obsessed with one question: what makes a person truly free? And that question wasn't abstract. He carried it with him even into the classroom, when, at just 24, he became a professor at the University of Basel. He taught for 10 years before being forced to resign due to health issues. But even then, he had already realized that education wasn't liberating, it was conditioning. That's where his real battle began. In an era ruled by rigid morals, oppressive institutions, and falsely noble ideals, his answer was brutal. Obeying the rules isn't enough to be good. Staying in your place isn't enough to be just. And above all, behaving well isn't enough to be free. For Nietzsche, the true sickness of the West is slave morality, a value system born from weakness, not strength, a morality that teaches people to bow their heads, to accept, to stay small, a morality built by those who couldn't fight and turned resignation into an ethical principle. Those who couldn't say, "I want," said, "I must." Those who couldn't assert themselves praised humility. And so, submission became wisdom. Sacrifice became an ideal. Renunciation became a form of superiority. But this moral construction, however noble it may seem, has devastating effects. It kills vitality. It drains the will. It turns people into well-adjusted automatons, emptied of meaning. Life becomes a quest for approval, never self-expression. Choices are made to please, never out of conviction. Every decision becomes a calculation. How will others see this? What's more acceptable, more polite, more proper? The result is a life lived in apnea, outwardly stable, inwardly numb. The inner voice, silenced for years, doesn't disappear. It shrinks, it twists, it becomes something darker. A silent bitterness, a chronic sense of inadequacy, a rage that never explodes, but corrodes everything. This bitterness has no face. It doesn't show itself with violence, but it festers in the background. It erodes trust, eats away at joy, wrecks self-esteem. Nietzsche understood that the real danger isn't being judged, it's being taught to judge ourselves constantly in order to fit a model of perfection that erases all individuality. This is the lethal pillar of education, an internalized idea mistaken for moral law, one that shapes behavior, guides choices, and suffocates the authentic voice. To break free from this mechanism, Nietzsche proposed a radical alternative. Stop believing the values you've inherited as if they were absolute truths, and start creating your own. Not just to rebel, but to take control of your own life. Not to destroy everything, but to stop quietly destroying yourself. In one of the most visionary works of modern philosophy, Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Nietzsche describes an image that captures this inner journey: the three metamorphoses of the spirit. Three symbolic figures represent three ways of existing: the camel, the lion, and the child. Three stages that don't follow a fixed order, but return, intertwine, and alternate within anyone who seeks freedom. The camel is the one who carries everything, obeys, endures, sacrifices, always says, "I must." It is strong, but only in bearing the load. It doesn't decide, doesn't create. It does what it's told. But eventually, the camel gets tired. It begins to doubt, to feel the weight of too many renunciations. Then comes the lion. The lion roars. It rises and faces everything without fear. It says, "I want." It's the symbol of courage, of the strength that breaks chains. But the lion hasn't created anything yet. It only knows how to destroy the old. It's a necessary step, but still not enough for true freedom. True freedom takes shape with the child. But be careful. It's not about returning to childhood or acting childishly. The child is a symbol. It represents the spirit of someone who has freed themselves from imposed duties and from the rage of rebellion. The child doesn't obey and doesn't oppose. It acts according to what feels authentic. It's the image of someone who has stopped living for others and started creating their own path without seeking approval. The child doesn't fight the world, it invents it. It doesn't carry the weight of expectations. It doesn't battle old rules. It lives lightly. It is present, sincere, open. For an adult, this means reaching a point where every choice comes from within, not from obligation, not from rebellion, but from loyalty to oneself. It means no longer reacting, but creating. Not executing, not destroying, but inventing. Nietzsche didn't describe this image as a final goal to reach once and for all. For him, it's a process that can repeat endlessly. Every time one steps out of a role, every time one stops pleasing, every time one chooses to truly exist, even without approval, one moves from one stage to another. And here lies Nietzsche's most powerful lesson. Behaving well, when it means conforming to a model that erases you, is not a virtue. It's a slow, daily suicide. To truly live, one must learn to recognize when kindness is actually fear, when good manners are self-censorship, when respect is just forced silence. Every person has the right to exist without constantly adapting to an external code. Every act born from authentic will is worth more than 100 correct but empty actions. Every word that breaks the script is an act of truth. This is the lethal pillar that holds up our society's education system. The idea that being good is always the right thing to do. that being mature means bending to the imposed system. That being just means accepting everything. But what is called goodness is often just fear. What is praised as maturity is disguised obedience, and what's admired as balance is often the result of deep, daily, silent renunciation. Nietzsche saw all of this long before anyone else. He understood that the dominant morality isn't born from a love of truth, but from a fear of discovering it. A fear that teaches people to behave just to be accepted, never to be real. That's why speaking out, showing up, living fully, becomes a revolutionary act. Self-respect isn't measured by how polite someone is, but by how willing they are to defend who they truly are. True dignity isn't in bowing the head, but in knowing when to lift it. Freedom isn't staying quiet to keep the peace. It's saying what matters, even when it breaks the balance. There can be no well-being where will is erased, no peace where the voice is silenced, and continuing to behave well just to avoid conflict, just to preserve appearances, is the slowest and most painful way to disappear.